First off, can anyone just hear me if I talk like this? Is that better? I feel restricted and attached over here. I just want to give the general welcome here first. Kind of welcome everybody in. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to the painful meeting that we're going to go through. I'm going to give an overview of the meeting here in a minute. Welcome everybody to Kehoe. Perfect kind of place to talk about this engine in because you can see all of it out the window and all the different ranges over here. Just to remind folks, the bathrooms are out here. Go out in the hall to the right, the bathroom right there, if you can get it. Otherwise, we'll get started. Thank you all for coming tonight. And thank you all for here.
Okay, I am going to use the microphone. Can you hear me in the back? Okay, thank you. All right, thanks everyone for coming. I know it's tough to be inside on a beautiful night like tonight, but we do really appreciate you taking the time to come and learn a little bit more about the draft management plan, and also just that we're interested to start to hear from you, your thoughts as well. I'm going to open by just providing some context about where are we in the management planning process and how can you engage with this process. So I'm just going to start by identifying what is a long-range management plan. That's what we're here to talk about tonight. Most importantly, it's the document that guides management of state lands. Generally, they last for 20 years. Sometimes we make them a little bit shorter. They're developed by the local land managers, many of whom are here tonight to speak with you. Throughout this presentation, you might hear us refer to them as LRMPs. So if I say that, or if my colleagues say that, that's what we're referring to. You also might hear us refer to the Castleton Management Unit as CMU. So if we say that, we're talking about Birdseye and Blueberry Hill. So among other things, the LRMPs include the following. The first is an assessment of natural resources on the property. This is really a documentation of the current state, what's happening out there right now. We also in the document identify our management goals for the next 20 years. And we identify the management actions that we'll take that will help us reach those management goals. So both of those are really future focused. How are we getting from where we are now to where we're trying to go? Why do we write long-range management plans? For a variety of reasons. First, as I mentioned, it's through this process where our staff go out and conduct those natural resource assessments that we can really understand the current conditions on the ground. This is really the deepest dive, most thorough look that we can give at those lands on a recurrent cycle. This process, which we're participating in, helps us understand public desires and opinion about state land management. It helps us thoughtfully consider how to balance multiple uses that we are charged with managing state lands for. It's through this process that we can provide the opportunities that the public seeks and that are consistent with the Agency of Natural Resources and its department's missions. This process of developing a long-range management plan ensures that management is taking us in the direction we want to go. And I think most importantly, in summarizing all of these bullets, it gives us the opportunity to really think big and take the long view. So it allows us to think at the landscape scale, across the boundaries of state ownership, and across staff and administrations as well. So how do we actually develop long-range management plans? And where are we in that process right now? We start by conducting those natural resource assessments. Those have been completed. Afterwards, you'll get a chance to look at all of the maps positioned around the room, which reflect the results of those assessments. We then conduct public scoping. You can think of that as an assessment of public interest or public opinion. That happens early in the process before there's a draft plan because we want to hear from the public early. Our staff then use all of that information to develop the draft management plan. That's where we are tonight. We have produced a draft management plan. We've released that, and now we want to hear what you think. Public comment on that draft plan runs for a period of time, so tonight is really just the beginning. We mark the beginning of the process today, June 12th, and we'll be accepting comments on the plan until August 31st. And then when that comment period closes, we read every single comment received, consider them, and we develop a revised management plan. Who actually does the planning? Across our state, our state lands are separated into 5 districts. These lands are managed out of our Rutland office, District 2. And within each of our district offices, we have what's called the district stewardship team, which is comprised of staff from across the 3 departments that are responsible for planning and managing state-owned lands in that district. One thing that's pretty special and unique about Vermont state land management is that this team gets together on a monthly basis to talk about planning and management of those state-owned lands, and it includes staff from across the 3 departments within the agency. So in this case, even though we're focused on lands that are owned by the Department of Fish and Wildlife, we're bringing the expertise of staff from within the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation and the Department of Environmental Conservation as well. So many of these staff are here tonight. I'm going to ask them to just stand up and wave as I call their names, because they will be stationed around the room afterwards and here to answer your questions. You met Travis. He was the one who welcomed you. He's a wildlife biologist. Joel is not here tonight, but contributed to the plan. He's a wildlife specialist. Luke Groff is here. He's a wildlife biologist with Fish and Wildlife as well. Danielle Ozarski, you'll hear from in a moment. She's our state lands ecologist. From the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation, in the back, we have Lisa Thornton, our stewardship forester. We have Ethan Crumley, our state lands forester. Rick Heading is not here tonight. He's our Parks Regional Manager, but he helped with the plan as well. Kyle Mason is also here in the very back. He's also a state lands forester. And then from the Department of Environmental Conservation, Angie Allen right up front is our basin head. To give you a sense of the timeline, really just of the point that we're at right now, we released the draft plan on May 21st on our website. If you participated in public scoping, that earliest phase of public involvement in the process, and if during that period of time you gave us your email, we contacted you and told you the draft plan is available. And then we also put it out via press release to the local newspaper and statewide sources as well on the 21st. Tonight is the public meeting. It will be recorded. So if you know people who would have liked to be here but couldn't, just know that it will be available on our website and they can watch it after the fact. As I mentioned, from today until August 31st, we will be accepting public comments. In other words, you don't have to be here tonight to submit your comment. And even if you're here tonight, you still have until the 31st to dig into the plan, ask questions, and then you just need to get back to us by the 31st. And then, as I mentioned, after August 31st is when we move on to reading and considering all of those comments received and then making updates to the plan. So where does tonight's meeting fit into this process? We have 4 goals. The first is to describe the planning process. We've just done that. Second, and really the bulk of this presentation, is to give you an overview of the draft management plan. We'll have 5 of the staff that I just introduced coming up to talk about the portions of the plan that they helped to draft. We'll give you an opportunity to ask questions of the district stewardship team. After the presentation, we'll break out and have sort of an open house style. You can float around to all the different maps. Our staff will be positioned around the room and you can have conversations, ask questions of them at that time. And then most importantly, we want to make sure you know how to submit comments on the draft plan. So I'll come back up at the end and cover that. In terms of timing, we expect that our presentation will wrap up around 6:45 in the full group. At that time, we'll sort of break out into the open house style, different stations, and you'll have the opportunity to really float around and ask questions of. of the staff who are here tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Travis.
Yeah, so I think I have to, so I can keep everything over. So I just want to give you a brief overview of the CMU and the WMAs that make it up. First off, just to get it out of the way, what is a WMA? Stands for Wildlife Management Area, in case you aren't familiar with that. So you'll hear me say that over and over again. In general, we have about 4,725 acres for these two WMAs, Blueberry Hill WMA to the north and Birdseye WMA to the south. This is part of the Taconic Mountains biophysical region. And just a few prominent features here. You have Bird Mountain, Herrick Mountain, Blueberry Hill, and we have elevation ranges from 500 all the way up to 2,600 feet. So quite a drastic change in the topography and the landscape in general. Both of these properties are owned and managed by Vermont Fish and Wildlife. You can see the breakdown of the acreage there of how we have them put together. And just to give you a general context of where these fall in the landscape and some adjacent conserved lands and connectivity, both of these fall within priority forest blocks as far as we've seen with Vermont Conservation Design, which Danielle will talk about a little bit more as well too. We have the West Rutland Town Forest, that's a bit east of Birdseye. There's a lot of other ownerships and easements within these connectivity blocks, Vermont Land Trust, the Nature Conservancy, towns and other state lands in this general area. These are two of the largest forest blocks west of the Green Mountains in Rutland County that these two WMAs lie in. So a really, really important piece and a really, really important piece of the connection between the Adirondacks to the west of New York and the Green Mountains to the east in the middle of the state. And then briefly, just to give you an overall view of kind of some of the things that we're going to hit on throughout this presentation, I want to go through quickly with you the unit-wide management goals. You'll see these things pop up through everybody else's discussion as we go along. First, protect the ecologically functional landscape and natural and cultural resources. Promote climate adaptation and carbon resilience on the landscape to address climate change impacts. Provide high-quality wildlife habitat for a diversity of species. Provide opportunities for dispersed, sustainable fish and wildlife-based recreation. And sustainably manage forests using silvicultural practices to achieve these wildlife habitat goals and while supporting healthy and resilient forests and wood products and local economy. I want to briefly go over the public scoping that happened for this. These consisted of in-person meetings, story maps, email comments, and various survey responses. The two in-person meetings happened in 2017 and 2021. That delay in those two is due to the fact that we first started to move forward with Blueberry Hill by itself, but we were waiting on an acquisition for Birdseye. That acquisition came through, so we decided that it was better to combine them. And then we redid the public scoping in 2021 to include that new acquisition. We distributed a story map and collected email comments and survey responses, in which we received about 140 comments from that process. These are just some graphs to show you. They're going to be a little difficult probably to read from all the way in the back. But when asked about the importance of resources on the WMAs, respondents expressed a strong interest in fish and wildlife habitat, recreation, and sustainable forest management. And then when asked about their opinions on availability of opportunities, the respondents expressed satisfaction with how WMAs have been managed. That was the just right responses. Nearly 50% indicated there was too little timber and wildlife habitat management. And then the activities that people engaged in primarily were hiking and hunting, which were by far the largest and most overwhelmingly represented in that bottom graph. Now we're going to move into the management plan overview. I'm going to hand this over to Danielle to start us off, and then we're going to go through and you'll see some of those unit-wide management goals pass through as we talk about each of our sections. So, here you go.
Hi, everybody. If you don't remember, I'm the state lands ecologist, so I do the ecological assessments statewide. Unfortunately, I've been here for about 2 years, so I wasn't involved in doing the mapping here in this unit, which is sad for me because it has some of the most pretty amazing natural communities. And I am from the Taconic region, and so it's close to my heart. And now I live in the Greens, and there just isn't that same level of diversity. All right. So the Taconic Mountains biophysical region is a variable region. It's characterized by extremes of elevation, precipitation, and climate. And if you live here, I'm sure you're very aware of that. And that variability is reflected on the unit. Elevations range from about 500 feet along Route 4 and Blueberry Management Unit to about 2,600 feet. To about 2,600 feet in Bird's Eye on Herrick Mountain. The average annual precip is location dependent, so lower elevations get less, about 37 inches annually, while the highest elevations receive up to about 46 inches, which is intermediate for the state. The bedrock underlying the unit includes both acidic and calcium-rich rocks, and that diversity is the foundation for the unit's biological and ecological diversity. So Bird's Eye is a large remote property with expansive forests and rocky summits. And there's rocky summits and cliffs on Bird Mountain and the north side of Herrick Mountain. The landscape of Blueberry Hill is warm and dry. It's characterized by oak and hickory dominated forests. And both Blueberry Hill Management Area and Bird's Eye, as Travis said earlier, are situated in large habitat connectivity blocks and intact forest blocks as well. And that helps to increase that landscape connectivity on the ground that we saw in that previous map. So both the forest and connectivity blocks within the unit have been identified in Vermont Conservation Design as the highest priority for conservation. Which is why we're managing this area, which is why we've acquired it over time to take on that responsibility. So they're regionally critical. The Adirondacks to the Greens is what we call them as a corridor. And it's been identified in the Staying Connective Initiative and anchors some of the most important north-south and east-west connectivity in the southwest region of the state. So it's very important, even from a statewide perspective. The ecological highlights. So many of these communities are the best examples of their type in the state. And these include dry oak, hickory, hop hornbeam forest, dry oak woodlands, northern hardwood talus woodland, open talus, red maple black ash seepage swamp. So there are some swamps, despite the fact that it's quite dry there, and temperate calcareous cliff as well. So these high quality communities are going to be protected in perpetuity and managed as highly sensitive and sensitive features. In addition to these smaller patch communities, there are A-ranks. So these are our high quality examples of 3 widespread natural communities on the unit. So these are the ones that you see most commonly when you're out recreating on the unit. And these are mesic, maple, ash, hickory, oak forests. And these are great for wildlife because of these mass trees, and the northern hardwood forest as well. And we'll maintain these communities to restore and enhance their ecological function into the future. In terms of rare plants, we have 4 species that are legally protected by Vermont's endangered species statute. And management proposed in the unit will undergo ecological review for potential impacts to rare, threatened, or endangered species, or state significant communities and areas where we have proposed management. And we'll be talking about the strategies for each different theme. So I'm going to start off with the strategies for ecological management, but you'll find that as you listen to the other folks, these are all really intertwined. So none of these strategies live in isolation from each other. We do this by considering management at multiple scales. So we're looking at the landscape scale, We're looking at the natural community and habitat scale and also at the species scale. And then additionally, management proposed in the unit will undergo that ecological review that I spoke about a minute ago. And so we'll do that to make sure to mitigate any impacts. So number one is to maintain the ecologically functional landscape that's envisioned by Vermont conservation design. We're going to promote wildlife movement and ecological connectivity, which already occurs on this unit. So we just need to keep it going. And we're also going to be protecting the sensitive state natural communities and rare, threatened, and endangered species. That's why it's important for us to map all those things out so we know where they are. We're going to maintain and enhance the quality of sensitive and common state natural communities and rare, threatened, and endangered species habitat. And we're going to enhance and restore natural community habitat features, forest structure, and species composition through targeted silvicultural practices. We're also going to promote the development of structurally complex old forest conditions and early successional habitat that contribute to meeting the young and old forest targets in Vermont conservation design. And last, but certainly not least, considering the things that we've seen coming, we're going to be promoting native species in any way we can, and then managing invasive species to the level that's feasible for us. And Travis will come back up and speak with you about wildlife management.
Thank you. So I want to give you just a brief overview of some wildlife habitat highlights from the assessments. Like I mentioned before, these are mostly large, unfragmented forest blocks. A big piece of these is that they have a really high abundance of mast, those acorns and nut producing species. Lots of those oaks, lots of those hickories, cliff habitats that have been utilized by peregrine falcons, 27 rare, threatened, or endangered species. You can see 24 plants and 3 animals. There's a large area of deer wintering area, but it's relatively unique to what we typically think of deer wintering habitat as being conifer cover. In this instance, it's more high production of mast on a steep southern facing slope that just doesn't gain a lot of snow in the winter time. So it provides a large amount of food for deer. And lastly, there's just a variety of habitats present across the management unit, semi-open areas and young and mature forests, vernal pools, small wetlands, a few streams, a little bit of everything that you'll find across the management unit. The management strategies and actions to kind of maintain some of these habitat features or improve them over time. As Danielle said, a lot of these are going to sound familiar as you hear them more and more. But protect and enhance that unique wildlife habitat for both those general wildlife species that are super common and those target wildlife species that may not be so common. Enhance habitat management in all the vegetative stages. So we want to use harvesting to create young forest to aid in meeting and maintaining what has a 3 to 4% total for young forest, which is a target in Vermont conservation design for the region. We're going to try to apply that to the management unit as best we can to maintain that over time. And then we also want to use a combination of passive and active forest management strategies to promote development of old forests and structurally complex areas in the management unit as well, not just limited to areas that are inoperable, but also areas that are just best suited to meet those management goals across the management unit. And then you want to do the general things of assessing all of our management activities for impacts of wildlife at the general levels and landscape levels, maintain all that connecting habitat, and always maintain high quality surface waters and protecting aquatic habitat when they'll be present. And I'm going to stay up here quick to give you the recreation highlights as well too. The biggest thing to keep in mind about the recreation opportunities on these wildlife management areas is that they're shaped by a few different things. That consists of the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department Wildlife Management Area Use Rules, which emphasizes fish and wildlife-based recreation activities. And there's also certain funding resources, Pittman Robertson acquisition funding, but also conservation easements and public access easements on some of these parcels that limit what types of recreation are suitable to on those properties to non-commercial, non-motorized, low impact, low density wildlife-based recreation, with the exception of some designated snowmobile trails. There is a lot of different opportunities to expand this. One thing that many folks that are local to the area will know is that parking and public access to Blueberry Hill is very limited. This is a kind of a function of partial acquisition being due to the construction of Route 4 and being cut off from access. We continue to pursue a lot of these opportunities when we can, but we need willing landowners to either sell stuff or provide right-of-ways for those options and town approval and things like that. So it's a very long process sometimes. There is a network of designated vast trails on a lot of the management roads, but not all recreation is trail-based. Most of the recreation on the WMA is for fish and wildlife-based, primarily hunting for the most part. And we really want to support in this area that remote area or remote type hunting opportunities and wildlife recreation. So these are kind of the management strategies that go along with that. Like I said, support those opportunities for dispersed fish and wildlife-based recreation. We want to provide that landscape for remote recreation. Continue to partner with VAST for the sustainable trail management that we've had with them, and ensure that we have proper planning and implementation for any new opportunities that arise, whether that be proposed new trails or anything like that, but also continue to press on public access. Right now, like I mentioned with Blueberry Hill, the Sportsman Federation Conservation Fund has graciously provided access through a property that they own next to Blueberry Hill, but we would like to expand on that wherever we can. And next, I'm going to hand it over to Ethan to go through some of the forest resources for you.
Thanks, Travis. All right. So when we consider how to manage the forests of the Castleton Management Unit, we think in terms of the global, regional, and local contexts. In considering the global context, we have to think about climate change. Vermont's experienced substantial increases in both temperatures and precipitation over the last 100 years, with the most dramatic changes occurring within the last few decades. We expect that these climate changes may impact the forests of the management unit by altering growing season conditions, which may cause issues with native plant regeneration and invasive plants, by increasing the risk of drought and fire, and by increasing extreme weather events. Bringing things a little closer, we consider the forest management of the unit in the regional context by looking at the Vermont conservation design, which Danielle and Travis have talked about already, and also forest health. Forest health is monitored in a number of ways across the state. Locally, on this management unit, site-specific plots, statewide aerial observations. That upper photo there is a photo from the aerial observations that are from, that's an annual program, and general observations are all used. On the management unit, specifically on Blueberry Hill, WMA, a number of forest health threats have been detected recently. You can see in the yellow there was forest tent caterpillar outbreak in 2018, and that was about 35 acres. And you guys have probably all noticed the spongy moth defoliation as you drove Route 4 back and forth to Rutland. There was defoliation both in 2021 and 2022. On these same dry south-facing slopes of Blueberry Hill, drought has the potential to impact forest health, particularly when paired with other stressors. speaking of other stressors, nearby infestations of emerald ash borer in Poultney and West Rutland will unfortunately soon spread to the management unit. And while it has not been yet confirmed on the management unit, beech trees across the Northeast are are being infested with beech leaf disease that is spreading across the Northeast at alarming rates. And also, as Travis and Danielle mentioned earlier, throughout the understory, in some places, there are invasive plants found in varying concentrations that interfere with native plants and their growth and regeneration, and they reduce the habitat value for wildlife. So to consider forest management on a management unit at the local scale, we undertook a timber resource assessment. And to complete this assessment, we used first remote sensing, where we reviewed GIS map data layers, looking at soils and site class, terrain, aerial imagery. And then we did a stand level, so we broke the area up into what we call stands. And we collected data in the field and reviewed and analyzed and summarized this data, which includes metrics on tree density, tree size, species composition. And we also looked at the district records and local knowledge. And this was especially helpful in evaluating the historical context of past management that helped shape current conditions. And we used these sources to summarize the Castleton management unit into 13 different soil types, 7 different forest types, and 94 distinct forest stands. Following this mapping and resource assessment process, we then analyzed stands for the best fit of management approaches to meet the long-range management goals. We identify stands best suited for passive management. These are areas that have sensitive features, high elevations, low elevation ecological representation areas, specific public use and management considerations, and steep slopes. And then also some stands are suitable for active management now or in the future. And these are stands that require management to meet the unit-wide goals. And from this last group, we've further identified stands currently suitable for forest management. And we call these areas harvest analysis areas. And through site visits and further analysis of forest conditions, forest management, timber harvests are developed. So the forests of the management unit provide numerous ecosystem services such as clean air and water, carbon sequestration, storage, wildlife habitat, and climate regulation, and provide a variety of benefits to people. Climate change and forest pests pose serious threats to our forests and their ability to produce these benefits and services. So in order for the agency to manage its lands to meet the many goals and objectives founded in the LRMP, it must focus its management on promoting diversity. We know threats are coming. Certain species of trees, ages of trees, or forest structures are more likely to be damaged than others by climate change effects or forest pests. So if we want to make sure we still have an overall healthy forest, we need to make sure that our forests have species, ages, and structural diversity so that we don't lose them in their services all at once. So to promote diversity, these goals will be met through passive and active management. So passively, we retain our forest lands and consider new acquisitions as opportunities arise, keeping forests as forests. And we classify areas to prioritize protection of sensitive natural communities. The map all the way on the left shows what we've classified as highly sensitive areas. Those are areas where passive management will take place. And then actively, we'll be conducting management in the form of invasive plant control, mass tree release, and pruning of both apples and oaks and other mass-bearing trees. We'll be doing open land and young forest management. We'll be doing ecosystem restoration And we're planning on 12 forest management timber harvest analysis areas. And those 12 analysis areas are on both the middle and the right maps there. So this slide illustrates how forest management timber harvest areas are developed and are not as large as the initial areas analyzed once the site level reviews are completed. The top picture shows the initial analysis area, and then the lower pictures show the progression down to the actual harvest area once the buffer areas are removed and site level reviews are done. So understanding how much young forest exists on a landscape is an important part of a forest resource assessment. And promoting young forest to the levels recommended by the Vermont Conservation Design helps to maintain and enhance an ecologically functional landscape. Young forests play a critical role in the life cycles of many wildlife species, including here are some species that depend on young forests. You got the golden winged warbler and the ruffed grouse and turkeys. And as you guys know, there are many others. And looking at the bar chart on the left, we can see that now in 2024, we meet the VCD target of 4% for young forest abundance on the management unit. Over time, however, this amount of functional young forest will decline as these forests age. If no more young forest was created in 10 years, we would have less than 0.5% of young forest present on the management unit. And by the end of the management cycle in 2044, we would have no young forest present. So much of the planned young forest creation will be accomplished by harvesting monoculture white pine plantations and old field white pine stands in the northern portion of the the Bird's Eye WMA. This work will regenerate young diverse forest stands in order to restore the native hardwood and mixed wood natural communities. And this photo taken by Travis yesterday, it's hot off the press, at Bird's Eye, illustrates this well by showing one of the plantations in the background and a healthy, diverse young forest regenerating in the foreground from work that was done 6 years ago. Currently, the understories of some of these stands contain thick layers of invasive plants, and they will be treated prior to harvesting to allow for native plant regeneration. If these forest stands were not actively managed, they would likely eventually become dominated by invasive plants. This would compromise the ability of these stands to meet the long-range management plan goals, such as ecological function, carbon sequestration, and storage, and also high-quality wildlife habitat. So old forests are also an important part of an ecologically functioning landscape. And management for forests with old forest characteristics will occur on the CMU using both passive and active management strategies. And like we said before, the purple area shows the passive management that will occur, and it'll occur on about a quarter of the CMU. And where active management occurs, strategies promoting old forest characteristics will be incorporated into management activities. And these characteristics that will be promoted include standing and dead down wood, spatial variation in tree density and tree size, multiple canopy layers, understory regeneration, and well-developed plant communities. And now Angie Allen's going to come up and talk about water resources and fisheries.
Can you guys hear me? Great, thanks. I'm Angie Allen. I'm a watershed planner with DEC. I'm the sole representative of DEC here tonight. So actually apologize, I don't have a nice green button-down shirt with a logo, but when we open it up in the back, I'll be standing next to the map with water resources and fisheries. So come ask me any questions that you may have with respect to that or the work happening in DEC. I can help you out with that. So I'll tell you a bit about the water resources and fisheries section within the LRMP. The Castleton Management Unit is located within both the Castleton and Pulteney River watersheds. Gully Brook and Birdseye water, WMA is the most prominent stream in the CMU. It's important as a cold water fishery resource. It provides habitat for self-sustaining wild brook trout populations. And one of the features, and actually the picture on the left is a picture just before leaf out of Gully Brook, so you can get a sense of what it looks like on the landscape. And so healthy forested riparian zones are one of the important features that we're looking at managing on the CMU to help maintain and sustain the water resources. Wetlands in the CMU are pretty sparse. They make up about 1% of the CMU as mapped. That said, the wetland features are critically important habitat for amphibians and other plant animal species, some of which are actually listed as rare, threatened, and endangered in Vermont. And when we get a chance to look at maps in the back, I've identified on the map that I'll stand next to some vernal pools, which are of note. They would be a little bit small to see if we put them up on the screen, but if you're interested in where those are located, come see me in the breakout session. I'm happy to show you where those are located. For the management strategies and actions, the strategy to point to first is just continuing to maintain the CMU and forested land cover, particularly with an eye toward protecting those significant riparian areas that I mentioned before. And then also maintaining intact wetlands where possible. That has the added benefit of buffering against flood events that would happen on the management unit and farther downstream as flood events are increasing with climate change. The second strategy is to enhance the resiliency of road and trail networks in the management unit. The benefits there are to protect water quality, to reduce and prevent soil erosion, and to provide for sustainable recreational and management access to these parcels over time. We're already doing a bit of that work along the road and trail network, replacing some of the infrastructure like bridges and culverts and sizing those, better handle the volumes of water that are moving across the landscape. Other things that we're working on doing are installing features like water bars, which are disconnection practices to avoid that sedimentation that happens downstream as water moves through superficial flow paths during storm events in particular. And then also closing or relocating those roads or trails which are really unsustainable. So much of this work that is being implemented currently is aligned with acceptable management practices for maintaining water quality on logging operations, as well as the riparian guidance that we have for animals. And so I just included this slide and wanted to show that other assessments are in the LRMP. I'm not going to speak to those, but if you're interested in legal constraints, historic cultural resources, and scenic resources, you can find those in the document. We're happy to take any questions that you may have about those. Danielle's going to speak to the land management classification. Thank you.
Okay. So taking all of the information you just heard, all the assessment information, all of us got together in a room and basically said, well, how are we going to manage this unit? Where are we going to do what? And that's where the land management classifications come in. So ANR, Agency of Natural Resources, uses a land management system to categorize all of its lands. So we do this for all state lands where we develop long-range management plans. In addition to our overarching goals, lands are managed using 4 types of management to be emphasized across the unit. The 4 categories are highly sensitive management. So you find this type of management in areas where we have uncommon or outstanding natural resources, where the protection of those resources, because of their sensitive nature, is the primary management consideration. We also have special management areas. So those are, I think you can see on the slide, it says 1.0 for highly sensitive. So when you go back to look at the map there and you're looking at the land management classification map, you'll see the numbers associated with those. So 1.0 is highly sensitive management. 2.0 is special management. And so these are for unique or special resources where protection or enhancement of the resources is an important management consideration. So an example might be that in a deer wintering area, if we're going to be doing management in that, we have to consider the deer wintering function there. And so any type of management will help to support that. Then we have 3.0, which are general management areas. So these are areas that can generally support a variety of uses or management actions. And within these areas, the focus is sustainable use of resources and minimizing conflicts. We also have a 4th one that I don't think actually occurs in the Castleton management unit. These are more common in like forest parks and recreation land where you have parks. And these are intensive management areas where there's a high level of human activity and high intensity development and are adjacent to state land. So just think about state parks and those facilities. Like I said before, there's a map in the back, so you can see where these units are located, these classified areas are located, and then also it's described in the plan in detail. So the breakdown within the unit is 24% is managed as highly sensitive management. Those were those, I don't know if you remember Ethan's maps with the purple areas where we talk about passive management. Those are those highly sensitive areas. And 26% of the unit, it's managed as special management. 50% is managed as general management. And then, as I said earlier, 0% for intensive management. So again, check out the maps in the station, you get a more detailed look, and then definitely go into the plan, look at the classifications in the plan, and then you can see all the land management strategies that are assigned to those different areas. And the maps will help you kind of parse that out. But there's even more detail in those maps beyond just the 1 point, 2 point, 3 point. There's more information that'll tell you the specific management in those areas. So definitely check that out. Yeah, so with that, I'll just reintroduce Hannah.
All right, I'm going to start to wrap things up and send us to the next phase of the evening. So as I mentioned at the beginning, tonight's meeting is really just the beginning of the public comment period. I want to make sure you leave here tonight understanding sort of what are the other resources that you can dig into to better understand what's recommended in the plan, and then also that you have a good understanding of how to actually submit comments. So the plan itself is over 250 pages. If you're inclined to read it, please do. Our staff put a lot of time into it. But we've also made it easier for you to process this information other than just reading the 250 plus page plan. There's a really excellent about 20-page executive summary. You can get that really high level overview from the executive summary right at the beginning of the plan. It's available on our website. I'll have the link up here in just a moment. We also took all of the plan contents and turned it into what is called a story map. This is a really wonderful way to process a lot of information. It's very map and visual intensive. The link to this is also available on our website, and you can really just zoom in on the sections that may be of most interest to you. So you can see at the bottom, there's all the different sections. If you're really just focused on Vermont conservation design, just head right to the VCD section, and there are plenty of good maps and visuals and text to support that review. Just a couple more snapshots from the story map to give you a sense. Lots of maps. There's the forest health section, the recreation map. A lot of what we have around the room tonight and has appeared in this presentation is also available online. This is the website I'll have this up once we wrap up the presentation where you can find the draft plan, you can find a link to the story map, and you can also find the information that I'm about to share with you about how to submit your comments. So everything you need is on this website. As I mentioned, the comment deadline is August 31st. We really hope that you'll take the information from tonight, the conversations with staff that you have afterwards, and take some time to dig into the plan, the executive summary, the story map. As I mentioned, you don't need to submit your comment tonight to have it considered. You have until the end of August. If you have your comment in mind and you're ready to submit it at the end of the night, you're welcome to. We've basically converted that registration table into a comment station, and if you want to stop by the table on your way out, you can leave your comment with us at that time. We'll accept comment through many different means. You can submit it through our online comment form, which is linked on our website. We have an email as well. We will accept physical mail. And I think I just want to mention that as you're floating around and having conversations with staff tonight, those conversations that you have back and forth, we're not recording them in any way. So it's really important that for something to be registered as an official comment, that you either take the time to put it in writing through one of these avenues or just stop at the table on your way out to register that comment. But we don't have note takers at the station. What do we do with those comments that we've received? We keep tabs on all of those different methods of submission. We monitor all of the comments as they come in. If there are questions that would clearly benefit from an answer so that you can submit a more informed comment, we will try to respond to that within the comment period, but the goal is not for us to respond to every comment that received. Just know that we're keeping an eye on them. You'll probably get an automatic response saying, thanks very much, we got your message. And if we see a question, we'll reach back out to you. After the comment period closes, we will read, consider, and discuss every single one of the comments received. We make updates to the LRMP to incorporate comments and suggestions that are compatible with the other natural resource management goals of the property and that are consistent with our department and agency missions. And my advice about how to structure your comments is really to include clear suggestions of changes you'd like to see in the plan. That's one of the most helpful things you can do if there are any changes, or if not, it's helpful also to know we like what we see. So at this point, we're going to transition into the open house portion of the event. I'll mention that we basically have, it's generally organized that we have recreation focused content over here. We have our natural community ecology wildlife habitat stations in the back. We have our forest resource focused stations on this side of the room. And then I will stay up here and answer any questions about the planning process, how to comment, or just generally be available. If there are any pressing questions about where are we in this process, what comes next, I'm happy to answer those now, or you can just come up and speak with me afterwards. At this point, yes. All right, I can't hear you very well.
Sorry, I'm surprised that I didn't. Because of the proximity.
Yeah, so I think the question was, how do we decide what units are included as part of the management unit? And I think I'll have you chat with Lisa or Travis in the back afterwards, and they can explain how we go about defining the management unit. Okay, so we have this room until a little after 8. Please stick around, ask questions. And I'm going to leave the slide up that shows how to submit a comment. And then as you're leaving, we also, even if you're not stopping at the comment station, we also have little sheets of paper we can give you with all of this stuff printed out. So you can just grab that and go, or see someone taking a photo on their phone. That works perfectly too. Great. Thanks, everyone.